Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today with us during this presentation. To hear today's presentation in Spanish, please go to the Interpretation tab on your Zoom panel and click Spanish. You can also mute the English speaker's voice, clicking Mute Original Audio. Now, we will review a few housekeeping items. Today's event is being recorded and will be made available publicly through our website and other media channels. For today's webinars, all participants will be muted. Please make sure your computer speakers are turned on and up to hear today's presentation. If you are having technical issues, please send a message to the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health COE on the chat box. If you have a question for our presenters, we ask that you use the question and answer tab on the toolbar. Simply type your questions and hit send. We can address questions to the presenter at the appropriate time during today's presentation or at the conclusion. We will be sharing a copy of today's presentation in PDF format through the chat box. We will also make a copy of today's presentation available to be downloaded through our website. You can find it under the name of today's event, and recording of today's webinar will be posted in our YouTube channel. Please complete the evaluation. The evaluation will help us know more about your opinion and thoughts about this presentation and what other topics and training would you like to see offered. A link to the evaluation will be shared through the chat. You can also scan the QR code at the end of the presentation to complete it. And we strive to accomplish this mission. Our mission is to advance and support the sustainability of behavioral health equity by promoting community-driven, cultural grounded, and personal-centered prevention, intervention, multiple pathways of recovery, and recovery support for diverse Hispanic and Latina community. Supporting the growth and expansion of our behavioral health workforce that serves the Latina and communities are very important for us. And for today's presentation, we are going to have Dr. Patricia Landers. She holds a Bachelor of Arts with a concentration in General Social Sciences from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus, completed courses leading to certification as an elementary teacher. She obtained a master's degree in education with a concentration in school psychology from the Pontifical Catholic University of Puerto Rico, completed a doctorate in clinical psychology at the Ponce School of Medicine, now known as Ponce Health Sciences University. She worked for 16 years as an elementary teacher for the Puerto Rico Department of Education, specifically in the Julio Alvarado and Ramiro Colón elementary schools, both in Ponce. Currently, she is an associate professor of the school psychology program attached to the Graduate School of Education of the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Puerto Rico. She also has her private practice as a school and clinic psychologist in the city of Ponce. She is past president of the School Psychology Association of Puerto Rico. She was elected representative of Puerto Rico for the National Association of School Psychologists for the term that began in summer of the 2022. She was general coordinator of the 2020 convention and co-coordinator of the 2021 convention of the Puerto Rico Psychological Association. And she was the president-elect 2023 of the APPR2. Dr. Lande Santiago has offered workshops, conferences, and trainings on issues related to managing emotional intelligence in the workplace, and effective time management. Has collaborated with the MHTTC and the Opioid Response Network, offering workshops on emotional well-being in children and adolescents during the COVID-19 pandemic, psychological first aid, and crisis intervention, among others. In addition, she constantly participates as a mental health specialist resource in the country's new media. Now I'll be handing this presentation to Dr. Lander so she can continue today's.
Thank you, Paola. Good morning to everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. And as it was mentioned today, we are going to talk about the impact of depression in the daily life of Hispanic and Latina youth. So what we are trying to accomplish today is to examine the prevalence of depression among Hispanic and Latina youth, We're also going to explore the cultural, social, and familiar factors specific to Hispanic and Latina communities that influence the development, expression, and treatment of depression in youth. We are going also to try to identify the unique symptoms, challenges, and barriers that Hispanic and Latina youth face when experiencing depression. We're going to try to analyze how depression affects the daily lives of those Hispanic and Latina youth in areas such as their academic performance, social relationships, family dynamics, and their overall work well-being, and discuss some sensitive intervention strategies and best practices for supporting Hispanic and Latina youth with depression. I know you have access to the chat, so any questions or any comments, any doubts that you might have, you could write them through the chat, and you can do it in Spanish or English, and I know Paola and the rest of the team will probably follow up with the chat as well as I, so we can address those questions. If not, we also have a space at the end of the presentation to attend to those questions or doubts or comments, okay? So as an overview, it's important for us to know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among Hispanic and Latina youth between ages of 15 and 19 years old. Also, in 2021, 28.7% of Hispanic and Latina high school students reported having serious thoughts of suicide, and 22% seriously considered attempting suicide. So these statistics are very alarming. The findings also show that Latina LGBTQ plus youth are 3.7 times more likely to attempt suicide. And we know that it's a vulnerable part of the youth that faces so many challenges. Also, I added to what normal youth, right? And when I say normal, is not part of this community, but other youth also face just by being in that age range. In 2023, an alarming 44% of Latina LGBTQ young people seriously considered suicide in the past year. While suicide and suicidal behaviors are complex and are influenced by multiple factors, depression is in the leading spot when we talk about risk factors among youth. Also, the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, provided data that stated that 46% of Hispanic and Latina youth experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in 2021. We know that when we are talking about depression, sadness and hopelessness are one of the criteria that has to be present in order to diagnose what depression is, okay? So in 2022, nearly 1 in 5, or 19.55% of youth between ages 12 to 17 had a major depressive episode in the previous year. This data in specific, it's very, very eye-opening, because 12 years old is very young. And usually we didn't go that low in age when we talked about depression. We know that children can be depressed, but seeing that beginning at 12 years old, we are dealing with youth that are facing major depressive episodes. It's very alarming. So the Latina LGBTQ plus youth in 2023, 3 in 5, or 59%, reported symptoms of depression in the past 2. So let's try to understand or refresh our knowledge regarding depression. Okay, depression is a common mental health disorder. It is described as common because there's many people who suffer depression. And something that is very important to know is that depression, people can live with depression and be total functional human beings in their workplaces, school performance, family dynamics, social dynamics. Okay. But when we talk about depression, it is a disorder that is characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and a lack of interest or pleasures in activities in which were pleasure with which provided or made people happy to engage in. Okay. So depression affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. So it has to do with how the thoughts a person has about related to many issues, how the person feels, and how the person behaves. It is very important to remember or to have present that being sad is not officially being or I mean it's not the same that being depressed. Okay, some people, especially youth, are using this term to refer to their sadness. Oh, I am depressed. Okay, in Puerto Rico we can listen to some of them that say estoy en depre, okay? In the like short term to refer to depression, when actually when we explore with them, it's just plain sadness. Okay, so we need to understand that not everyone who is sad is going to develop a depression, okay, as a mental disorder. Sadness is an emotion like any other, which all of us may experience at any time. Okay, so when we talk about depression, it is important also to know that it could lead to various problems, including emotionally and physically. Okay. So the symptoms in depression can vary in severity and duration, but they often include, as I said, the sadness, that feeling of emptiness or hopelessness. Right now, there's many things going on in the world which can lead youth to believe that there's no hope in a future. The climate change, politics, social issues that are going on that might lead them to think that there's no use to study, to prepare themselves, to establish long-term goals. So that feeling of hopelessness is one of the criteria in depression. Also, as I mentioned, the loss of interest or pleasure in most of or all activities. So in youth, we could see before they used to practice basketball, or they used to enjoy going out with their friends or painting or dancing. And from a moment on, this changes and this doesn't produce any kind of pleasure or enjoyment for them. Okay. Also, the significant weight loss or gain or changes in appetite. We need to know that depression sometimes is associated with people not eating, or people losing their appetite, but it can also manifest with people eating more or gaining weight. The same goes with the sleeping patterns. People think that youth that are depressed might sleep a lot because sadness and emptiness and hopelessness is associated with a low mood. So sometimes we're looking for long hours of sleep, or resting too much, but also it could be insomnia could be one of the signs. So it could be eating more or eating less, sleeping more or sleeping less. Also, fatigue or loss of energy, the feelings of worthlessness, excessive guilt. And we are seeing this a lot in youth, the guilt, okay, and feeling that they're worth of anything, okay. Also, difficulty concentrating, thinking, or making decisions. And this is very important because sometimes we see students who are not concentrating, are lowering their grades, their academic performance is suffering. And sometimes the first thought that comes to teachers' minds or to school staff's mind is a attention deficit disorder or a learning disability. And sometimes we forget that depression or anxiety or other mood disorders can affect these areas too. And we're going to see that along the way through this presentation. Also, the restlessness or slowed physical movements, recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal ideation, or suicide attempts. And we need to classify these three areas, right? The thoughts of death not necessarily imply that this person wants to die, okay, or wants to harm themselves. It's sometimes is an scream. They're screaming like they need to rest. They're overwhelmed, or they need their space. So I want to die, okay, or I don't want to be here anymore. But it's not necessarily equivalent to wanting to harm themselves or to commit suicide. Also, the suicidal ideation is when a person thinks about it. A person wants to probably harm themselves or commit suicide. Okay, so the ideation is when a person is thinking about it. Having a specific plan is another component of when we are evaluating or assessing suicidal thoughts, because many people have the idea or want to do it, but don't know how or don't have a specific plan. And also, the suicide attempts is when a person already has attempted, right, of harming themselves. So this is a risk factor because this elevates the danger when someone has an idea, suicidal ideation. Okay. Also, so we can diagnose depression. There has to be 5 or more symptoms that are present during a 2-week period. Okay, and it also represents a change from previous functioning, with at least one of the symptoms has to be a depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. So a person to be, in order to comply with the diagnostic criteria for depression, has to be depressed. Their mood has to be depressed, or they have to have loss of interest or pleasure. Okay. Also, those symptoms must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. And it is important that these symptoms are not the result of physiological effects of the use of our substance or another medical condition. There are some medical conditions that have symptoms that relate to a depression, but we need to discard that there's a good physiological condition before establishing that it's a depression. Also, under the effects of substances, we can also see or observe some of the symptoms related to depression. There are other considerations. The symptoms should not be better explained by other mental conditions, for example, bipolar disorder. We know that for a person who suffers from bipolar disorder, there's a stage in which they are in depression and another one when they are in a manic state. So if there's a manic state or evidence of there being a period of time where the manic symptoms are active, so this is not plainly a depression. We have to look forward. We need to look into other diagnoses. And also there's some specifiers. There's people who suffer from depression in a mild state or moderate or severe. Also anxious distress or with psychotic features that could be also present during depression. Okay. There are some key statistics. In the US, approximately 13.3% the youth ages from aging from 12 to 17 years old experience a major depressive episode in 2021. Also, the Hispanic youth reported higher levels of depressive symptoms compared to their white counterparts. Okay. So that's why our webinar today is focused on Hispanic and Latina youth, because their risk factors sometimes are more elevated than for other cultures, right? Or other youth. So depression specifically is a significant concern among this youth, because studies indicate that they experience higher rates of depressive symptoms compared to the non-Hispanic peers. They are at higher risk because they have reported so. Okay, they tend to report higher levels of those depressive symptoms. Also, the research has found that approximately 22 to 32% of Hispanic and Latina adolescents, which is higher than the national average for youth in the United States. The average runs from 11 to 20%. So they are above average, ranging from 22 to 32%. Also, the depression rates, when we are considering gender differences, are higher or tend to be higher among Hispanic and Latina females compared to males. The Latina adolescents are more likely to report feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and suicidal ideation compared to their male counterparts. What are some of the risk factors? Okay. The risk factors, here we go. Several factors are the ones that contribute to a higher prevalence of depression among Hispanic and Latina youth, including, and I think this addresses one of the questions that I recently read. Okay, why is that difference between Hispanic and Latina youth and the rest of the youth, their counterparts? First, the cultural stress. Okay, Latina and Hispanic youth have to face the acculturation. They face discrimination and identity conflicts that play a significant role in the development, I may say, of depression symptoms. Also, the socioeconomic status, because many of these youth are at a low socioeconomic status, so they have to deal with poverty, the lack of access to healthcare and educational opportunities that can increase their vulnerability to depression. Also, the stigma and the mental health barriers. Why? Because in Hispanic and Latina communities, there's still a strong stigma related to mental health. Some may think that it's make people weak, that mental health is, they don't recognize that there are mental health problems. They don't recognize the benefits of mental health professionals. So this can lead to them to underreport the symptoms, and also to be reluctant to seek professional help. Okay. And also the family dynamics can be a risk factor because of the pressures that come from the family, the expectation, and those intergenerational conflicts regarding the cultural values And all of this can develop into emotional distress for youth and Hispanic and Latino youth. Also, when we are speaking about youth or adolescents, okay, during this development stage, identity is a central role in their development. Why? Because it's a critical component when youth transition from childhood to adulthood. I always, when I treat my adolescent patients, I always say that this development stage is blah, right? It's like a development stage where, like the dump, where everything is playing a role. For example, you have physical changes, right? Hair grows in parts you didn't know it was going to grow. Parts of your body are larger. People expect for you to take a bath and to dress accordingly and to be more social and to have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a significant other. And also emotionally, you are changing. So additionally, they're exploring who they are. Okay, that's why it says that identity plays a central role, because they're focusing on understanding who they are, what are my values. Okay, remember that during this stage there's a lot of questioning. My parents think this way, my family has these beliefs or these values, but what are mine, and what is my place in the world? So this is a lot to manage and to deal with. Okay, adding all of the physiological and emotional and cognitive changes that they are going through. So when we refer to the formation of identity, it is important to know that that it's crucial for them to build a stable sense of self, which is going to influence their personal development, their social interactions, and their future decision making. Obviously, if we are trying to understand or to identify who we are, who am I, what are my beliefs, what are my values, who I want to be in this world, what is going to be my fashion sense, my thoughts on politics, on the environment, etc. This is going to guide what are my future decisions and the way I behave today and tomorrow. Okay. Also, when we talk about adolescence and the risk factors, first of all, as we mentioned, the crucial part is that they're forming their identity and they are exploring. Okay. They are exploring even their ideologies so they can design or form that personal identity. So in that exploration, they're going to find out or conclude what are their likes, their dislikes, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their core values. And when we, as adults or any person, has that moment of looking inside, right? Having that introspection and saying, who am I? The difficult part of this is not finding our strengths and the things we like. It's identifying things that I didn't know I thought this way. I didn't know I had this weakness. I didn't know that I had this prejudice, or there's a lot of things that we find out about ourselves that we don't like. So imagine when you are in the development stage of adolescence and you are trying to figure out who you are, and you come up with all these things that you like and things you dislike. Okay, so for Erik Erikson, right, who created the psychosocial development theory, the primary task during adolescence is identity versus role confusion. Okay, so the adolescents seek to establish that clear sense of themselves And if they fail to do so, right, because Erickson's psychosocial development theory says there are two tasks, right? There's one versus the other. If it is accomplished, what you gain like strengths, right, and you confirm certain aspects of your development. But if it's not, if you fail, okay, then you could have some consequences. So, for example, if they seek for that sense of self and they fail, they may experience confusion about their future roles in society. Okay. If they accomplish this development stage, then they are able to create or develop their personal identity. Okay. Also, another risk factor is the influence on decision making. Okay. They want to shape during this stage, they want to shape their decision about their careers, their education, their relationships, their values, and many other things. They begin that critical thinking about what their future looks like, or they want to, the future they want to have. And also, it has a very strong influence on their self-perception and the beliefs they are forming. Okay. I have seen many cases of first year, second year college students who didn't create, right, or develop a real strong identity regarding their academic preferences. For example, many of them came from families of doctors, and they said since they were a little kid, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. When they went into college, they understood, or they faced the reality that they don't like what being a doctor means. So that change of professional path sometimes is very, very strong for them to deal with, because it seems like it makes them feel guilty. It makes them feel like they are letting down their family, etc., etc. So those processes of decision making help the adolescents establish a stronger sense of autonomy and independence. And for some reason, this generation is lacking a lot of those experiences of decision making. We are constantly seeing parents or dealing with parents who want to solve all the problems their children have. They want to state the opinion. They want to give the options. They don't let this develop into a process of decision making and holding or standing by their decisions. For some reason, this is happening a lot, at least here in Puerto Rico, with many of the adolescents and children I see in private practice. Also, during adolescence, one of the risk factors is the peer influence, and also the social influence. So we know that social influence, they are getting it from everywhere. They have so much access to the social media. Yesterday I was talking to a colleague, and she was telling me, when we were in school, bullying was even fun. People identify our weaknesses and made it into a joke, right? And sometimes, for me, that's the person was telling me, for me, this was like a wake-up call that it's not a big deal, right? That I can have fun, or I can make fun of my own weaknesses. Bullying is not good in any, no matter the generation we're talking about. But she was stating the difference between now. Also, before, at 3 o'clock, we left school and we didn't know, we didn't have any communication with our peers, unless they were our neighbors, or we practice sports together or something like that. But if you didn't live in the community near the school, or where the majority of your peers were, you had no contact with them until the next day. Now we're dealing with a generation that has contact 24/7 with everyone. Okay, so we have to understand that this is a real strong pressure and influence. And for adolescents, being accepted and approved, right, to many of them, because there are some that really don't care, but the great number of adolescents are looking for that peer acceptance, for that approval. Okay, and if they don't get it, their identity development can suffer, leading them to adapt behaviors or attitudes that align with their social circles. So probably they have developed an identity, but this identity clashes with what their peers are doing or what their peers like. So this then makes them think they have to change, or they have to adapt to that social pressure. Okay. So also the cultural and ethnic identity is very important because it's crucial during this stage. They need to adapt and understand what is their cultural background, their language, their traditions, their values, and how that can contribute to a positive sense of self. But we have to take into consideration that when your cultural background, your language, your traditions, and all of that is different from your peers, then it could be like something stressful because I'm being different, I'm being singled out. So when your cultural background is diverse, you can also face the challenges of balancing their ethnic identity and the cultural norms of the mainstream. Okay, so there's where the acculturation stress, jumps in, and the conflict of identity. For example, my family or this Mexican family moves to the United States. They have their Mexican values, traditions, identity, their food, their everything, because they are still Mexican, no matter if they're living in the United States. So if you have in that family a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old that comes into the United States and begins school at 5, 6 years old, and is surrounded by a new culture, by new norms, by new identities, it's going to be very difficult to have, because it's going to seem like they need to have an identity at school and in their social interactions, and another identity at home. So acculturating is going to be very stressful for many of them. Also, the gender and sexual identity. Okay, this is the stage, and probably late childhood also, that they're going to explore their gender identity and their sexual orientation, trying to understand where they fit. Okay, so there's a spectrum of gender roles and sexual preferences, and they have to explore, or it's going to be inevitable that they go through the stage in which they try to relate to someone, or to a specific gender or a sexual identity. Okay, this is very important for the self-acceptance. Okay, and finding that support in the community that aligns with their identity. Okay? Literature has stated that the family and peer support is very significant on how comfortable adolescents express their gender and sexual identity. Okay, so their acceptance is very important. Also, the role of family and the expectations from society. It's very important for adolescents, their sense of identity. Why? Because the pressure from trying to meet the standards that their family set, their parents, their grandparents, the rest of their family, their culture, their society, which can then create that conflict when the expectations from all of these people differ from their personal desires. As I stated, this adolescent I have as a patient, their family is a line of doctors everywhere. So he probably felt the pressure since he was a little kid that he has to be a doctor because I come from a family of doctors. And probably in that family, there's other kinds of professions, but probably the main profession is doctors. So they need to know that they don't have to follow in that steps. But we know that there are families in which this is very important. Okay, so when the expectations are strict and they differ with their own expectations, it could provoke or cause some role confusion or rebellion. Okay. Also, the development of self-esteem, of concept. When you are deforming your identity and your perception of yourself is influenced by your success, your failure, your social interactions, and the feedback they receive from others. That's why it becomes a risk factor, because they cannot control the influence from others, their social interactions. Okay. So when you have a positive identity, you are sure of who you are, what you want, obviously it's going to contribute to a higher self-esteem and a healthier self-concept. So then you are going to lead to a better mental health and well-being. Okay. So there's additional risk factors, like, for example, the language barriers. And sometimes when Spanish, for example, is your main language and it's spoken at home, and then your children go into school and they start catching up on English and they become fluent in English, sometimes they don't want to speak Spanish, or sometimes parents don't speak English. So there's that. There are cases in which the children become like interpreters of their parents. So also this is a barrier that sometimes we can see in Hispanic and Latina youth. Also, the racial and historical trauma of their heritage, and the immigration trauma too, the way in which they have come into this country and what they have they went through, right? And also what other people think about them and about their race, etc. Okay. So what is the impact of depression or how can we see the impact of depression in daily life? I'm gonna check, yes, the chat, okay? That is why the home, sí, voy a contestar, déjame ver. Yes, the risk factors that we have mentioned in depression can also be associated with substance use in Latino and Hispanic youth, okay? Because remember that when the risk factors are things that they need to deal with and that make them more vulnerable to develop mental health disorders, but they can also develop substance use disorder because they're trying to deal with so many things that they can use the substance as a pain healer or a self-medication. Okay. Also, this is why the home environment plays a huge factor in creating a healthy concept of self, which will help the youth navigate challenging moments in life. That's very true, Maribel. Although we're talking about adolescents, I often see this in adults that have experienced trauma as an adolescent. Yeah, that's true, Madeline. Remember that things that we suffered in our childhood, we follow through adolescence with it if it's not dealt correctly or dealt at all. So all of that adds on to all the stress that we face during adolescence. And if it's not dealt correctly, or we don't seek help for that. We follow through adulthood. So many of the issues that adults face go back to something that happened in their childhood or during their adolescence, and their seeking of self identity. Yes, I think it is very important. This is a very this is a very important risk factor that is not taken into consideration, because finding out that we have different cultural values or even practices may be a cultural shock for the whole family. That is correct. That is correct, Susan. And sometimes there's a lot of guilt because we think that we are not being faithful to our family and to our background and to our culture. Okay. Very good. Yeah. Los jóvenes con diversidad funcional podrían tener aún más vulnerable a todos estos factores. Yes, it's true. There's other risk factors, like if you have any kind of physical condition or learning impairment or disability, it also adds on to the risk factors. Okay. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. It makes the workshop more dynamic. Okay. So how does it impact in the daily life? So, for example, in academic performance, we could observe some decreased concentration and focus. Lack of concentration and attention is not always a consequence of attention deficit disorder. Okay, so we need to understand this. Also, lower grades and motivation, and the increased absenteeism. Why? Because I cannot perform in school as I'm supposed to or how it's expected to me. So I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to a place where I don't fit in or where I feel that like a failure. So the absenteeism is one of the signs. Oh, also any conduct problem, behavioral problem is also sometimes the first sign that something is going on. So when a child misbehaves or an adolescent misbehaves, we need to pay attention because they're trying to send a message. That message not necessarily has to be something severe like trauma or abuse. It could be a message that I don't know how to read, or I don't understand your language, or I don't feel like I fit in. Okay, so we need to address that and we need to pay attention. Also, in social relationship, the isolation and withdrawal, it's an observation we need to pay attention to. Feeling of loneliness, conflict with peers, the fighting, the discussions, the all of this bullying and all this stuff can also be part of the impact of depression. Family dynamics. Then when we face the communication challenges, not only because of the language, but also because our values are different, because our preferences are different. Okay, so that is very important. Also, the changes in family roles. Okay, so then we are facing. The other day, I had she's in first year college, and she's first seek help in 11th grade in high school, on and off. And at one point, she discussed her sexual identity, and that she was trying to understand her preferences, her sexual preferences or orientation. And she comes from a family, a very close knit family here in Puerto Rico, but her parents are very old school, even being young parents. Okay, so like the thoughts of boys are boys and girls are girls, and girls dress this way and boys dress this way. And she was expressing how they try to understand, but obviously their beliefs are very strong. So she has this girlfriend, and she tried to bring her home, and their parents tried to make her feel welcome. But when she left, her mother made a comment about her clothes, that it was very manly. Okay, it's like boyish clothes. And my patient told me she was very angry because that's disrespectful, even if she didn't say it to the girl, and all of this. And I had to explain that sometimes children surpass their parents in knowledge. Okay, so we think and we believe that our parents know it all, and that what our parents say is the final say in anything. Okay, so but in this generation, with this generation, and probably the generation before this one, they have so much access to information, which parents have too, but it's very difficult for parents to understand what's going on, and so many terms, and so many gender identities, and so many things, that sometimes the children, right, their children have to educate the parents. So sometimes the family roles go this way. So sometimes the children um, they are able to acculturate more quickly than their parents. So sometimes they have to assume roles that they weren't expecting to. Okay, so also the cultural expectations. Italians are whatever. Okay, or Italians never give up, or Chinese have to do this, or are good in school, or are good in professionals. Hispanic and Latino, we didn't come to this country to be lazy, or for people to call us names, or to think that we are we are not smart, or whatever. So all of these are very important pressures that our youth, our Hispanic and Latino youth are facing. Okay, sadly, here in Boston, it seems to only be noticed when a child is frequently absent or they are displaying behavioral issues. Sometimes it's too late, right? When we catch up on that, so we need to observe. Observation is key. When we can find out sometimes when people go through difficult divorces or separations, or find out their child has substance abuse problems. When we sit down and review all the elements, there's always a sign. There were always signs along the way, so we need to follow those signs it's from the beginning. Okay, and in school settings, for example, we need to communicate, because probably I'm an English teacher and I have the kids for an hour, and then you have the history teacher who has them for another hour. So, and the math teacher has them for another hour. So it is important that us three, or the whole team, can communicate and see. I observed this in this student. How is he or she dealing with in your classroom? So we need to communicate. So because I might see something that you might not see, or I might see something and you might see something else, and it adds up and it makes this bigger than what we think. Okay, so alienating themselves from everyone because no one understands their inside problems. Okay, yes, Cynthia, and this is very typical in adolescents because they think that no one has been through this stage. For some reason, they think that we adults skipped this development stage, and they have the sense of belief that no one will understand them, no one in the world. And probably things are more modern. There are social media that wasn't there when we were youth, and many other things, but the changes, the everything we face as an adolescent is still the same. Okay, so we need to let them know this. At times, there is just a lack of communication and a lack of understanding, feelings, external factors. It's true. And that's the tension between parents and children. Yes, Maribel. Most have been exposed to more information. Yeah, and I open-minded. I have learned a lot from my 22-year-old daughter for the last 5 years. Very good modeling. Topic teaching parents how to be their children's advocates and how to evaluate if their school system is capable of serving their children's academic needs. Very interesting on it. And yeah, we must be our children's advocate. Yes. Very good comments and in the chat. Thank you for that. Okay. The overall well-being is impacted because there's emotional distress, there's increased risk of self-harm or suicidal thoughts, and we need to separate these two. Self-harm is not necessarily seeking to die. Okay, it's not a suicidal attempt. Okay, so the self-harm is sometimes a way for them to escape or to deal with intense emotions. And that is something we need to deal with Hispanic and Latina youth, that sometimes emotions they don't know about emotions. Why? Because they come from cultural backgrounds where crying is not accepted, where boys have to be strong, where probably the women are not permitted to express their feelings and all of this. So we need that social emotional learning is very important. Okay, and also the cultural factors and identities can affect their overall well-being. When we talk about suicide risk, we have stated some statistics, and Hispanic and Latina youth, particularly females, have a higher risk of attempting suicide compared to their peers from other ethnic groups. The Latina adolescents are at a significantly increased risk for suicide attempts, with rates nearly double those of white non-Hispanic females in the same age group. Why is this important? Because if we know that Latina adolescents are at risk, we need to create prevention strategies and prevention plans in schools, in communities, because they are at a higher risk. Okay, so this is why risk factors are important. So what should we observe? Okay, there's a lot of symptoms that can be present in youth and adults. And sometimes the difficult part in adolescence is that sometimes we relate the symptoms as normal or usual adolescent behavior or mood swings. Okay, so it's very, very difficult sometimes to know when it's part of adolescence and when it's not part of their normal development. And one of the thing is the intensity. Okay, how intense and how frequent are those symptoms? So we have emotional, behavioral, physical, and cognitive. For example, emotional signs: if there's persistent sadness or hopelessness, if they feel down, if they express that things are not gonna get better, why am I gonna stay in school? And some of those expressions that might help us understand. Also, the irritability or anger. We know that adolescents are irritable because of the stage they are doing and their hormonal changes. Okay, so we need to see if this is also present with something else, like the outbursts, like the sadness. When they get, they seems that you cannot even look at them because everything bothers them. So we need to see if this is a pattern or something that is constantly going on. Also, the feelings of worthlessness or guilt, the loss of interest in activities, and if they have difficulty concentrating. Also in behavior, sleep patterns, if they have any changes, appetite changes, social withdrawal, decline in school performance, and engaging in risky behavior, like, for example, substance use or self-harm. Okay, we see a lot of youth or adolescents wearing their hoodies, long sleeve hoodies, trying to cover up. Sometimes they cover up their marks of self-harm. Sometimes they use their legs or some parts that are covered by the clothes. So we need to observe and pay attention. Also, if there's frequent complaints of physical pain like aches, headaches, stomach aches, or other discomforts when there's no medical cause, okay? Emotional distress can also reflect in physical signs. That is very important to know. Also, the low energy or fatigue, when they feel tired constantly, they lack energy, being sluggish, even if they sleep their 8 hours, 7 hours, and it's not expected for them to be so sluggish. Also, in changes in personal appearance, when they don't want to take a shower, they don't use deodorant and use the same clothes over and over, when there's a decline that is significant in self-care and grooming. Also, there are cognitive signs, okay? There's negative thought patterns, constantly thinking about negative aspects of life. They stay focused on past mistakes, their pessimism, outlook on the future, when they have the difficulties with decision making. For example, in simple decisions, what do I want to eat? Which shirt do you want to buy? What are you going to wear? And sometimes those are signs of low self-esteem or lack of motivation. Okay, thoughts of death or suicide, if they express desire to die, as I stated before, this is something very common now between youth. You know, I'm gonna kill myself if I don't get that tickets to that concert, or the show is sold out, I want to die. So we need to talk to them about it. We need to ask, when you say you want to die, you want to leave this planet, you know, you don't want to live anymore. No, 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 that's not what I mean. Okay, so we need to be more conscious of what we express. Okay, also, hints about hopelessness. Sometimes they won't express it clearly, but they could, their actions or their behaviors can show us some hints about being hopeless. And also, the lack of purpose can be a warning sign. As I said before, sometimes we see one of the signs, one, but other people can observe other signs. So we need to communicate. Mothers and fathers, mothers and grandmothers, and caretakers, and sisters and brothers, and the community, and the coaches, and the school. We need to be in communication. So if something skipped by me, probably the teacher caught on it. So it could help me understand what's really going on. There's also some additional signs. For example, extreme sensitivity or reaction to failure, when they overreact to criticism or setbacks. Also, rebellious behavior, acting out when they defy the rules, engaging in conflicts with authority figures like teacher, parents, aggression, if they display aggression, the loss of motivation or enthusiasm, when they don't want to engage in daily activity, the lack of efforts, and lack of effort, I've seen it in adults too, most from years past to the present, right? I even want to research about that. So because there's very lack of the minimum effort, I call it. It's like a minimum effort effect. So it also can happen in youth. So how do we address depression in Hispanic and Latina youth? There's some practical recommendations. We need to understand depression. And by understanding depression is that we, as professionals, as people who educate ourselves, that's why you're here, right? And I commend you on that, is that we understand what depression is and how it can manifest in different people. Okay, we need to understand that depression is a growing concern in the Latina and Hispanic youth. So we have to understand what are their cultural and social challenges, so we can understand how this can affect their mental health and what are their daily struggles. Okay, so if we know that Hispanic and Latina youth have those higher rates of depressive symptoms, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts, we need to act upon it. So we need to understand depression. We need to address it, but we also need to educate other people on it. Parents, peers, our students. We need to know that this is not um, like acting out of someone or someone seeking for attention. This is a serious matter. So we need to know about depression. We need to educate so we can create prevention strategies, so we can address this issue in our school, so we can understand what our Latina and Hispanic youth are going through. Okay. Also, we need to address it with cultural sensitive assessment. Okay, we need to build that rapport with our students, with our patients, with our clients. Okay, we need to work on that relationship so it could be respectful, so you can understand those cultural values such as family dynamics, respect for elders, community ties, etc. I know it is a lot of work. Yesterday I had my interns in their weekly seminar, and one of them was telling me that there's a student from Haiti that was admitted to the school this week, and we were like, from Haiti, she speaks Creole. So what is this kid doing in an all Spanish speaking school, right? So my student said, I went into Google and started looking for tools, and I started with the Google Translator. And my goal, I have a list of things I want to know about this family. What brought them here? What are their needs? Where has this kid been before? So this is part of that building rapport and that understanding. Okay. Also, the language consideration. If you are able to, right, if you are able to conduct those assessments in the preferred language, so you can assure that accurate communication. Sometimes I have patients, 5, 6, 7-year-olds who go to an all English school. And when they go into session, I ask them, is it easier for you in Spanish or English? And they would say, yeah, it's okay, Spanish. Some of them will say in both. Okay, we will use both, the famous Spanglish, right? And I remember when my nephew was growing up, he was probably 1 or 2 years old. My brother, his father, told my father, our father, to speak to him in English all the time, because my father is North American, and my mother is from Puerto Rico. So that's the way it worked with us. My father used to speak to us in English, and my mother in Spanish, and also we went to an all English school. So he tried to do that. So when my nephew got older, my mother used to try to talk in English, and he said, no, abuela, tú no, right? Not you, grandma, you speak in Spanish. So if it's possible, try, okay? Also, if there's access to a bilingual health professional or interpreters, as we have today in this webinar, that's a good thing to do, because we can address them in the language where they feel comfortable. Okay. Also, the holistic approach, we need to explore those cultural beliefs. Okay, sometimes things that we might think that are strange behaviors, or an acting out, or probably some a conduct problem, might be a cultural belief that they have. Okay, maybe they don't speak up, maybe they look down when it's as a respect. Okay, if also it could help them understand how what is their stigmas or what is the perception they have on mental health, and we can help them understand that it's normal, that it's okay, and you don't have to be labeled as crazy or anything else, as it is normal in your culture. Okay, so we need to understand what are their beliefs. Also, we need to use validated tools. Okay, if the tools we have are not validated for Hispanic or Latino population, well, we are not using the correct tools. Okay, and when we use those tools, we need to clarify that when we write our reports. Okay. Also, we need to plan a tailored treatment. Okay, taking into consideration the cultural context, the family engagement, and address the acculturation threat. We need to know how are they transitioning. Okay. Also, we need to use evidence-based interventions. Okay, we know that the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques are the most used. It can help youth identify and challenge their negative thought patterns and develop healthier coping skills. We also have the interpersonal therapy that it can help us address the interpersonal issues such as family conflicts, peer relationships, and social skills that might contribute to the youth's depressive symptoms. The mindfulness techniques, okay, that we can teach relaxation, meditation, and it's probably a good way to address it, because culture might have an impact, but it's something that we can adapt to any culture. Okay, when we're trying to manage in stress and anxiety. Also, in each culture, there's some practices that we can make reference to, like breathing, meditation, etc. Also, the medication management. If medication is needed, we need to address this and help and guide parents or caretakers in this process. Why? Because there are many cultural attitudes toward the medication, and families are going to have their preferences. So we need to address this and help them have the correct information in their language, in their cultural context, so they can see it as a helpful strategy. Okay. Also, address the barriers to treatment. Sometimes we don't know if there's stigma. So we need to use a lot of psychoeducation to the youth and their family. Also, we need to identify the barriers to access a good mental health services. Okay, there could be financial constraints, lack of insurance, fear of legal issues for undocumented families, and we know what's going on in the states regarding this issue. So sometimes it's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't know, or they don't have access, or they believe that it's gonna be like negative consequences for them. Also, the community resources. We need to know what community resources are available, like support groups, mentoring programs, after school activities that are culturally relevant. Okay. Also, long-term support and follow-up is important. Sometimes we deal with these cases and then we let them go. We need to monitor the progress, see how they're adjusting to treatment, maintain the consistent communication with the family and among the school personnel. Also work on relapse prevention, so they could have coping strategies to handle threats in the future or other depressive episodes, a plan that helps them recognize the early signs of relapse. Also, empowerment and advocacy. We encourage them to express their cultural identity. They don't have to hide it. Okay, and to advocate for their own mental health needs within their school and community environments. Okay. Also, it's important to consider our cultural competence. Okay, so that we can self-assess on how culturally sensitive and competent we are, understanding the unique experiences of Hispanic and Latina youth. Also, we have to involve the family, because in Hispanic and Latino youth, family is important. It plays a very significant role. And also, it could enhance the treatment outcomes. Access and equity, we have to promote that access to mental health and that it is inclusive to all Hispanic and Latina youth as anyone else. Okay, it has to be accessible and inclusive to everyone, regardless, of their social economic background. Okay. A final thought: empowering Hispanic and Latina youth with cultural sensitive care and support is essential to help them navigate their journey toward mental health and well-being. Okay. So this is my part. I thank you for your attention. I'm going to refer to the chat to see if there's any. I see there's a lot of comments and questions, so I'm going to share them with you. Let me see where I can. Okay. Yes, Miriam, you're going to have copy of the presentation. The link is going to be posted in the chat. Okay. I don't know if it's already been posted. Yeah, Annette, you'll have the copy. Yes, Susan. Yes, you're going to have a copy. Cynthia says we have to try not to get offended when our children lash out, as you mentioned earlier. With my children, when my children lash out, I let them lash out and say whatever they need to say. Then if that happened, them feel a bit better. To my surprise, they have shared with me that it did help. Okay, their dress mode is small, but a good to notice the change in the behavior. Yes, Maribel, yes, I tell children they have permission to feel and express themselves, but it's not okay to use their feelings to be hurtful towards anyone, and teaching them from a young age that their feelings are indicator of a deeper need is not a great leader. I'm Hispanic, and the reality is very few people take the time to process their feelings correct, let alone children, teach children how to take the time to process what they are feeling, because everything has a root cause. Break the stigma. Yeah. Sí, Aquiles, sí, van a enviar una copia electrónica de esta presentación en el chat, ¿ok? Cynthia, my son's best friend took his life in 2023. I'm so sorry to hear that. No one saw the signs when he was alive, but after we spoke about him, my sons noticed small signs of depression, but did not see it. Only afterwards, when talked about him, they noticed the changes you mentioned. But since they were not familiar with those symptoms, they did not know he was hurting. That's so sorry. So I'm so sorry. That's so sad. Yeah. Yes, at work, the Madeline, it's okay to feel. While I keep reading your opinions and questions in the chat, here's the QR code for the evaluation, and it is important so we know how we did in this presentation, so we know what else would you like to receive webinars on. So if you can take a few minutes just to complete it, it will be great. Maribel, yeah, it's okay to feel sad and disappointed and even experience abandonment or rejection, but those moments and feelings do not have to govern us. Very good. People as a whole are not taught how to process the emotion or painful moments, because we live in a society that says keep going, cheer up, just wipe your tears. Yeah, because you're strong. Yeah, there's and this has to do a lot with cultural factors, right? When we see here in Puerto Rico, after we went through Hurricane Maria, and then we went through the earthquake and the follow terremotos, temblores. Yeah, the shaking afterwards, right? People said, oh, we are resilient, and we are resilient. And they started romanticizing resilience because if for some reason government and other areas, right, sectors from our country believe that resilience is to overcome anything, that you have to accept everything and overcome anything, and it's not the correct definition of resilience. So many people are using resistance instead of resilience. So yes, we need to understand that it's okay to be angry, and that it's okay to be sad. And if you are sad today, or you don't want to talk to anyone today, doesn't mean it's going to be like that for the rest of your life. You can take a break, and when I deal with or work with children, small children, and I work with emotions and recognizing emotions and managing emotions, not controlling, is managing. And when we talk about anger, I tell them you can be angry, and some of them are surprised to hear that. Why? Because we associate or we relate anger to something ugly or something bad. But anger is just a feeling, an emotion that all of us can experience. The things that are seen as bad is when you hit somebody, or you do harm to someone. That is the part that is ugly, or that it's seen as bad. So we have three rules. You can be angry, but you cannot hurt yourself or hurt another person physically or emotionally, and you cannot damage property. Okay, so those are the three rules. We write them down. We design like a code, and they take their code and take them home, and they practice it. And I tell the parents, let them know they can be angry. They don't hurt themselves, they don't hurt anyone, or they don't damage property. Okay, those are the three rules. So what do? You walk around, you listen to music, you take a shower, you take a walk, you breathe in, breathe out, you meditate, you visualize, whatever you need to do. Okay, so it's important to let them know. Thank you, Carol. Yes. Jocelyn, yes. La cultural y religiosa, yes, the cultural and religious beliefs are very important to understand. And it's also important to educate other children and youth that are not Hispanic and Latina about culture, okay? And how all of us have different beliefs, and how all of us, we don't have to be the same, and that the people that are different are not less worthy, okay, or worthless. So we need to educate both parts. We need to empower Latino and Hispanic, but we need to educate others to understand, okay? Sensitive to everyone. Yeah, thank you for your kind words. Thank you very much, and I commend you. Gloria, saludos desde Puerto Rico también. Yes, saludos. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, Chelsea, I think it says Chelsea. Sí, muy relevante. Así que saludos a todos los de Puerto Rico que están conectados. I commend you for being here. Ay, gracias, Chanti. Thank you for your words. Thank you. And we need to continue. Okay, we need to continue educating. Yeah, how do you incorporate understanding of religious belief and practices when supporting the mental health of Latina families? Asking, I'm not sure I replied. Probably it's in the Q&A. Yeah, sometimes we think that we need to research all of this, but we can ask them. Okay, we can ask our students, our patients. We can ask them. As I ask here, for example, if there's people who kids who tell me, oh, this is my gender orientation, and I say, okay, what does that mean, if I haven't heard about it before, because this is changing all the time. So if for us to understand and create or engage in that rapport, we can also ask, okay? If no, because in my family, we pray before having our supper. And my friend was over the other day and thought it was strange. Okay, why do you pray? Talk to me about it. You know, what is your belief? What are your beliefs? Okay, what else do you believe in? Also taking into consideration that we need the information that applies to whatever we're dealing. We don't need to know everything about this religion, or we don't need to understand it fully, because we are not religious experts, okay? We are mental health experts or education experts. So we need to ask so we can understand where this behavior, where this guilt, where this emotional distress is coming from, okay? So we ask. And after we ask, if we need to know something else, we research it. And also, APA has practices when dealing with spirituality and religion, so we can also research on that, okay? Socializar, sí, sí, sí. Jóvenes resilientes, yes, youth have to be resilient, they say. Yeah, but we need to provide them the tools to overcome whatever situations, okay? It's not that they have to, oh, you have to go back to school. There's no power or electricity, but you have to be resilient. No, nobody needs to have to be in a classroom at 105-degree weather without any ventilation or fans or air conditioning. Okay, so it's not resilient. That's not resilience. Okay. We already posted the presentation in PDF format, so you have it there. Maribel, religion, I am learning that with wisdom and compassion, we can connect with people, even if people have different faith. Yes, wisdom, compassion, and respect. Okay, that's very important. Very important. We don't need to do the same as our patients to be to show some compassion. No, we need to understand where they come from. Okay, where they come from. Madeline, me llena de mucha alegría ver a tantas personas de Puerto Rico que están haciendo este tipo de trabajo, porque en el tiempo que yo vivía en Puerto Rico, el tema de salud mental era un tabú. Es así, Madeline, pero hemos progresado mucho. We have come long ways, and we keep educating people and more and more organizations and schools and all type of groups have contact us to provide this type of education and webinars on mental health. So we are going places, one step at a time. Yes. ¿Dónde los puede consultar para cualquier consulta? Están aquí for any consults you might have or any questions or doubt. Our website is here, and this slide I'm projecting right now, and the email info at Hispanic Latino Behavioral Health.org. Okay, if you have any questions or doubt. Yes. Como nosotros hacemos la diferencia. Yes, gracias. Como acceso a la presentación, you have access to the presentation here in the chat. There is a link to the PDF format, okay? Yes, and the email is here in the chat too. And right now, the last message in the chat is the presentation, okay, the file. So if there's no more questions, I'm very grateful for being here. I commend you once again for taking the time to educate yourself and refresh some knowledge. I'm grateful for all your comments in the chat regarding your own experiences. So thank you very much. Paola, I don't know if you have any comments, final comments.
No, that'd be all. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here during this presentation today. We encourage you to fill out our evaluation. This will help us to continue providing the services we do. And other than that, thank you so much, Dr. Landers, for being here and for all of the information you provided today.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Everyone, you too.